Hello my dear friends, welcome to my German reaction channel. As I mentioned, or as the title mentions, I'm a German reacting to stuff that's interesting to me. And since I'm a historian, this obviously is interesting to me. World War II every day with army sizes. And yeah, maybe you can get you guys, some more input than the video provides. And let's start reacting. Now obviously this is the beginning of the of the Second World War, when Germany attacks Poland. And as you can see, it goes really fast, even without the Soviet intervention, which Hitler and Stalin had communicated between themselves to partition Poland. I personally don't think it would have been necessary, because Poland wouldn't have been able to defend themselves against only Germany too. But it strengthens the relationship between Germany and the Soviet Union at this point, which is why Hitler considered this necessary, because he wanted to suggest to Stalin that he would be safe from Germany and that nothing bad would come from Germany towards the Soviet Union. And this was rather diplomatic action than a useful action for Germany. Final note. Also notice how this number kept getting smaller and smaller, but they never stopped fighting, and this is what Poland also continued doing after being beaten up already and losing all of their land. So they never officially surrendered, and they never stopped fighting either, which is really impressive. So there was a lot of guerrilla actions in this very area here, and that undermined the German war effort a good portion, and that's quite impressive from Poland. Now we enter a stage on the Western Front, so around here, which is called the Phony War, because neither the Germans nor the French or the British really attacked there during this time. And now the Finnish War should begin shortly. Yeah, there it is. Which was built on Stalin's effort to conquer some of Finland. And as you can see, the numbers are really uneven. And even though this was the case, the Finnish still managed to stand their ground, as you can see there, which is quite impressive. But now the numbers on the Finnish side start dwindling, while the numbers on the Soviet side keep increasing, and eventually it would have led to a defeat of the Finnish lands. So that's why the Finnish were forced to sue for peace here, which they will do shortly. There it is, and Stalin actually gets something, but not everything he wanted, obviously. Now the Phony War continues on the Western Front. And this is the first real war action against the Allies, conquering Norway and Denmark, which was rather about Norway than Denmark, because they wanted the iron that was available there. Now the big ground offensive against France started, and you saw here 400,000 encircled, which is the Battle of Dunkirk, or the retreat of the over Dunkirk rather, being evacuated with military ships and even civil ships. Every ship that was available, the British managed to mobilize to get their people out of here. And it's impressive, because 400,000 people lost on this front really means something at this point. And it really made possible for the Germans to push through this fast. So the strategy of Blitzkrieg really capitalized on this Dunkirk encirculation. And now, since Italy had also joined, it was a matter of days until France eventually fall. Fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets. Now it also, it again looks like nothing much is happening, but it's not true, because during this time over the English Channel there's lots of air fights between the Luftwaffe and the Royal Air Force, which is what is happening now, which is unfortunately not very easy to see on this map, obviously. In God's good time, the new world with all its power and might
steps forth to the rescue and the liberation of the old.
And this is this decision right here. You maybe saw it with the writings down here, which unfortunately keep disappearing under my play bar, which is kind of unfortunate. But still, this action from Albania launching into Greece was not a mission that Hitler wanted, but rather Mussolini wanted. And it also didn't really, as you will see here, didn't really work out at first. The Greeks actually pushed them back a bit, which is why Germans decided, or Nazi Germany decided, that they now have to help Italy defeat Greece, because otherwise this front might develop to their not necessarily to their advantage, let's say it like that. And even though the numbers, the Italian side here are bigger than on the Greek side, they didn't really have the ability to conquer Greece as a whole, which is why what happens next happens, which is
Never in the field of human conflict.
Interestingly, also the African front, where the British pushed back the Italians quite a bit, which is also two fronts where the Italians are actually messing up massively, and makes it all the more harder for the rest of the Axis. Fortunately, makes it harder for the rest of the Axis to actually go through with their plans.
Was so much owed by so many.
But now soon, Romania, I think it is, or Bulgaria. Yeah, Bulgaria joins the Axis, and Yugoslavia opts to be invaded within, I think, 6 days. And then the way is free to actually conquer Greece. Yeah, there it is. I think it was 6 days. And with the Germans arriving, the Greeks had no chance left and were conquered also. Now the only front really besides the airstrikes is in Africa right now, and now the collection of men to invade as the Soviet Union starts. So Operation Barbarossa will start shortly. There it is. And although Stalin actually had been warned about this, he chose to ignore the news, and thus the Western Front for the Russians, or the Eastern Front for the Germans, was not heavily secured for the Soviet Union, which is why these massive pushbacks here can occur. And at this point, the Germans even have more people in the field, with also Finland up here joining in again. So yeah, it really didn't look good at first for the Russians, but now, since we move toward winter and reinforcements for the Germans kind of stall, it gets in more plain field. But notice the capturing of many prisoners of war in this area. Prisoners of war actually were they were treated horrible by the Germans, really horrible. And most of them died in camps similar to those where the Jews were eradicated and other unliked persons by the Nazis were eradicated. And the prisoners of war had a very similar fate, unfortunately. And this is why the Russians, when beginning to push back, actually were hell a lot of mad and committed some very many atrocities too. But notice how in the meantime the reinforcements from the Soviet Union have increased by quite a bit. And this is the year or the months where it slowly begins to turn around, and the Soviet Union can actually push back the Germans, because frankly the Germans didn't really have a lot of manpower left, while the Soviet Union obviously had lots of manpower, and their problem was their the poor gear they had. Also, Hitler didn't really give his soldiers any warm winter clothing, because he, as his plan in the east and the west worked so well with conquering France in just a few weeks, he thought the same thing would happen on the Eastern Front, and the Soviet Union would surrender before it even got to this point of it getting so cold. So yeah, that was one major mistake Hitler made on the Eastern Front. While this all happens, fighting in Africa continues, obviously, but not in the scale of the Eastern Front. Just 100,000 people on both sides, while there were millions on the Eastern Front, which is why this one's talked about much more. So now we got some enforcements, mainly drawn away from the Finnish ones, and this safety backups along these coastlines with the British, because they were deemed not as necessary as continuing the war efforts in the east. Now Rommel begins pushing into Egypt, and the Germans try to reinvigorate the Blitzkrieg vibes they had before. But obviously with 2 million manpower less, it's not as easy to continue this effort. And here's what happened, because Hitler wanted access to the oil fields that are located in this area. He chose to rather focus on the southern parts of the Soviet Union rather than actually marching towards Moscow. So this is what happened here, and now in 42, the winter will arrive again, and the problem that the Germans had the winter before actually got a lot worse, because by this time supplies were dwindling on both sides, but the Germans being surrounded kind of on all sides here with the British colonies, with the Brits themselves here blocking off, and the Soviet Union on the east, the Germans did not have as much access. And now here the combined efforts of the British and the what they later called Free France were pushing back the Germans, or pushing the Germans out of Africa, as you will see shortly. And also the Eastern Front keeps stalling. And this right here, 300,000 encircled. At this point, every encirclement is a heavy hit on the Germans, because they just can't reinforce anymore, really, because they're lacking manpower even more dire than last year. So yeah, every encirclement right now is a heavy toll on the German war efforts. Now we get some more reinforcements, kind of the last one they really can afford. All the while reinforcements are arriving at the Eastern Front, the coastlines are getting weaker, and the defense again in Africa gets weaker, the defense in Greece gets weaker. You have to pull the people away from there towards the Eastern Front, which makes the rest of the Reich more unstable. And now the next interesting thing begins here, the invasion of Sicily, or the invasion of Italy as a whole, which is quite pivotal towards ending the war, just because with the war reaching the Italian mainland, Italians were first shown what is really about to happen, since the Germans began being pushed back here, and no real invasion of the British islands could ever be successful. The Italians the Italian people began noticing that they're probably in for a hard time with the invading allies from the south. And Hitler already kind of saw this coming, and he knew that Italy couldn't defend itself, so we would have to send some more troops in. Yeah, that right there. Excuse me, that right there was the moment where Italy decided to leave the Axis, with kicking out Mussolini out of power. And this 140,000 people, these are the Germans now again defending their former ally and the country or the lands that they see as their lands. But you'll notice the Germans being pushed back on the Eastern Front, the Germans being pushed back here. And with these both facts, the Allies decided that it would be time to maybe open up another front to spread the Germans out even more. And this is what happens with D-Day, which is quite some time away now, but it will happen eventually. While we see still stand on the Eastern Front rather, but German numbers dwindling massively, as you can see, faster than the Soviet ones at this point, even though the Soviet Union lost a lot more soldiers during the Second World War. The Germans were pushed back severely by this point and could do nothing against it really anymore. Even though they managed to stop the invading Allied forces here, you can see that there's 500,000 versus 300,000, which will eventually lead to a loss if both armies are equipped the same way, which is not the case anymore. Here the Allies were supplied much better because Germany had been doing a world war for 5 years now. So yeah, the resources were dwindling.
Airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force. You are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you.
And there it is. There's the D-Day. And you will see the number of the Allied forces rising up fast. Since they first conquered some area, they could supply their troops very well now, and as I mentioned, the defense of the coastline in France had been weakened gradually during the last 2 or 3 years because the Eastern Front had to be reinforced again and again. And now it's really interesting to see the collapse of Germany really being pushed back here, being pushed back here, being pushed back here, being pushed back here. The only area where they were kind of safe, so to speak, would be the area around Norway and Denmark, because Allied forces decided that it would be more pivotal to first push into the German mainland rather than these outer areas here. Which makes sense, I guess. But now you can see kind of the reverse blitzkrieg here. It's really going fast until they reach German cores. Which is the line here, kind of even the line where the war began in the first place. But yeah, now the sides will all push in gradually, and it becomes more and more clear that the Germans can't really win the war anymore. Which is fortunate, which is very fortunate indeed, because the Germans committed some horrible atrocities, as I mentioned before, and we're all have to consider us really lucky that the Germans didn't actually win this war. And you see even now still the numbers here keep increasing, while the numbers here keep slightly decreasing, but the Soviet Union mobilized 7 million people on top of the ones that already died, which was about 20 million people, which is a number so big you can't really even imagine it. Like 20 million people dying, and the numbers you have here: 6 million people fighting here, 3.6 million people fighting here, combined here there's also 1 million fighting, and there's 1 million almost here, 2 million here. The amount of people that were fighting this war is just insane. And all of these people, or many of these people, died or had horrible wounds or decapitations or anything really, which is often forgotten by historians because it's just the small people, so to speak, not the big politics. And we see here 479,000 people captured or encircled, which is the end of this war, fortunately. You see some areas are still held up by the Germans. Is this Corsica? I think it's Corsica. Some Austrian areas, some Czech areas, and some northern German areas also still are in the hands of the Germans at this point when Berlin is captured. But with Berlin captured, the war is basically ending, and these soldiers will give up in the next few days or the next day. And this is the end of the war, fortunately. So yeah, really interesting video to see this all visualized, and I like this kind of videos. There's more of these with other wars, and perhaps I will look at them the next time. But yeah, this one actually, obviously, as the Germans, the one my mind went to first, because it's just such a big part of German history that we are taught in school all the time. And yeah, we shall never forget, obviously, with some rising far-right politicians or political parties right now in Germany. This world war gave us some lessons that we should think about all the more now, some 80 years after this war. These lessons become more and more relevant to the Germans again, and many Germans are kind of afraid of what might be happening in a few years with the far right in Germany again. So yeah, that's also part of the reason why I wanted to watch this video and talk about this a little bit. So anyway, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you the next time, but not before I subscribe to this dude, obviously, and if you like, you can subscribe to me too. And I will also like this video because it was really good, and I will see you all the next time.